This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. On May 7th to 13th of this year, the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal will be hearing the second charge of crimes of torture and war crimes, now listen to this, X-Zone Nation, against former U.S. President George W. Bush and his associates, namely Richard Cheney, former Vice President, Donald Rumsfeld, former Defense Secretary, Albert Gonzales, then Counsel to President Bush, David Addington, and then General Counsel to the Vice President, William Haynes II, then General Counsel to Secretary of Defense, J.B., Bybee, I believe it is, J. Bybee, then Assistant Attorney General, and John Choon Yu, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General. This is one of the first times in history that lawyers have been charged with war crimes for rendering misleading advice in an attempt to exonerate war crimes by their principals and governments. Joining me now to further discuss this is a gentleman we've had the pleasure of having on the show before, and he's one of the judges on this panel, Alfred Webre from Vancouver, BC. And Alfred, always great having you with us. What is all this about, Alfred?
Yeah, sure. You know, Rob, and let me say that as a judge on the tribunal, I'm appearing here in a very special way because we have taken an oath to be impartial in the application, in the finding of facts, and the application of the law. So my appearance today is to inform the public and your listening audience that, in fact, these proceedings are taking place and have taken place in the past, and that certain verdicts have been reached, and that witnesses are being heard.
Under what jurisdiction does this trial hold its hearings?
Well, that's a very interesting question. What has occurred, and the way that the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal really originated, started back in 2007 when Tun Dr. Mahathir bin Mohamad, who was Prime Minister of Malaysia for 25 years and really brought Malaysia into the 21st century. He held an international war crimes conference in Kuala Lumpur in 2007. And at that conference, a number of victims came forward and gave testimony at that conference. These are individuals who had been tortured, allegedly, at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, and who had been tortured at other places in Iraq and in other locations throughout the Middle East, at the because of the policies of U.S. and UK governments. Now,
I'm going to ask you to hold. I'm going to ask you to hold on for a sec here, Alfred, because you and I have to take a commercial break, and I don't want to cut you off in the middle of what's going to be a very interesting hour. Alfred Webre is our special guest, X-Zone Nation. Now, for more information about the war tribunal that we're going to be talking about this hour, the tribunal to hear second war crime charges against Bush and Associates, go to www.criminalisewar.org, and that's CRIMINALISEWAR.org. And Alfred and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break. It's going to be one of those interesting hours here on the X-Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. We'll be back. Don't go away. Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine like hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining room can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you're visiting, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, old Florida cuisine at its best.
Are you interested in the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, or psychic phenomenon? Join me, Tim Bartley, co-host of Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, coming mid-January 2017 to the XZBN. We will channel spirits live and talk to them, revealing all kinds of amazing information. Spiritual attachments will be found and removed on the show, and so much more. To find out when you can listen to Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, visit www.xzbn.net for listeners on both sides of the veil.
X-Zone Nation, Alfred Webre is our very special guest this hour. We're talking about the Kuala Lumpur crime trials or tribunal against war crimes, the charges against Bush and Associates. And before we went to the break, Alfred, I asked you what the jurisdiction of the tribunal is. And can we get into that, please? Because this is a great question. And, you know, why hasn't the mainstream media picked up on this?
Yeah, sure. Well, what emerged at the 2007 hearing is that the International Criminal Court, which had been formed under the Rome Statute, where you have 113 plus nations have signed it, the prosecutor there had been approached with over 400 complaints of war crimes by the UK and US in Iraq and had not taken action. Mm-hmm. So, therefore, the jurisdiction of the court, and this was a paper, a lecture that, in fact, I delivered at that conference, that under what we call natural law. Natural law is actually the source of all social law. Social law is both criminal law and, say, civil law. Civil law is, family law, contract law, things like that. And so under natural law, which is based on justice. And justice are principles. These are principles that exist in the universe. Everybody knows when something is just and unjust, and that's why we have a jury system. And where it can be shown that the organs of justice are not occurring, and this is why you have a citizen's arrest. This is why a citizen, under certain circumstances, can perform the operations of state justice. A duly constituted citizens tribunal operating under natural law, that is under the assumption of justice, when the organs of the international organs of justice, namely the International Criminal Court, are not functioning because the prosecutor there, who was compromised, obviously, overlooked over 400 complaints. So out of that, the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal was formed. There's a charter. There are judges from all over the world. I was selected as the representative judge from Canada, and we've all been sworn in to follow the charter and the rules of the Kuala Lumpur Tribunal, and we have held various proceedings. We've held this will be our third session of proceedings, and people can go to criminalisewar.org to see all the full proceedings and transcripts there.
Maybe I can ask you this, and that'll clear up a few things. As a judge, what authority do you have outside of these hearings?
That's a fascinating issue. Of course, citizen tribunals always have moral authority.
All right, I understand the moral authority, but how about legal authority?
Yeah, there's a fascinating legal authority, and that comes under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, the treaty that set up the International Criminal Court, because the design of that treaty was to decentralize the prosecution of war crimes, so that under that statute, every nation that becomes signs that treaty and becomes part of the International Criminal Court has to pass legislation granting universal war crimes jurisdiction to their national courts. So that their national courts are actually supposed to be the first line of defense or prosecution of war crimes. So that citizen tribunals are kind of down in the trenches. We go out and we hold proceedings with transcripts, with witnesses under oath, and then we take those proceedings and we pass them on to national courts, and we pass them on to the International Criminal Court for enforcement, so that they have the arrest powers, and they have the prosecution powers, and they have the sentencing powers.
All right. Is your authority recognized by governments such as the United States, the Canadian government, or even the United Nations?
Yes, because this is under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and Canada, for example, is a signatory and would be obligated. Now, we had not to jump too far ahead, but we actually had a test case of that. And on November 22nd, 2011, the tribunal found George W. Bush and Tony Blair, UK Prime Minister, guilty of crimes against peace. Now, crimes against peace is the Nuremberg-level war crime. That's starting a war without justification, and that's the Iraq War. Immediately thereafter, at the end of November and at the beginning of December, George W. Bush went to 3 African nations. I happened to be, coincidentally, in South Africa at a conference at that time, and he was in the neighboring 3 African nations. And the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission, who we had charged to contact all signatories of the Rome Statute and urge them to apply our verdict to Bush and to Blair, contacted the 3 African governments vigorously. And the African governments at that point, it was just like a week after our verdict, said, well, this is a novel situation. We don't know what to do. So we are out there actively prosecuting what is within the letter of the law, and we've had a very lax attitude around the world with regard to prosecution of war crimes, even though the Rome Statute provides for this. So we're going to continue as a tribunal. I mean, I can't speak for the tribunal, but I can say that in the November 22nd, 2011 verdict, the commission was directed to apply to all signatories, and they did so in the case of those 3 African nations, and that became a world press issue at that time.
All right, here you've got 3 little African countries. You're going after the President of the United States, the former President of the United States, and the former British Prime Minister. Do you really think that the major powers are going to take you serious?
Sure, because here you had the former U.S. President, George W. Bush, trying to do some kind of, trumped-up public relations humanitarian visit to these 3 African nations, and we blew his cover.
All right, you blew his cover, but do you actually see the tribunal's power being exercised in the United States of America?
No. Here is what we see.
Okay.
Practically speaking now, George W. Bush, and this is factual, George W. Bush, Richard B. Cheney, and Donald H. Rumsfeld cannot travel out of the United States, and they are being protected by the military by the CIA, essentially inside the U.S.
So let me just understand this, Alfred, because this is rather hard to believe that you're telling me that George W. Bush, the former president of the United States, Dick Cheney, the former vice president of the United States, and David Rumsfeld, the former Donald Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of Defense, cannot travel outside of the United States?
Yes, correct. And each of those gentlemen have canceled their most recent trips to travel outside of the U.S. In fact, Dick Cheney was supposed to speak in Toronto recently, and he canceled it. Rumsfeld canceled his most recent trip, and George traveled to Switzerland, and they canceled, and the formal reason was, quote, fear of arrest for war crimes. So that the combined pressure of citizens tribunals, number one, like the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, like the Brussels Tribunal, which is another citizens war crimes tribunal, like citizens groups in Germany, in Spain, and in Spain, the courts there, using their expanded war crimes jurisdiction, have been very active in prosecuting former war criminals. Remember that the way that Colonel Augusto Pinochet was extradited from the UK back to Chile to face war crimes charges there, even though he was under the direct protection of Margaret Thatcher in the UK, was through the war crimes, the Universal War Crimes jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court in the Chilean courts. So that treaty brings a new day
All right,
to
Alfred.
the issue. Yeah,
Alfred, please stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Interesting.
yeah.
Very, very interesting. Alfred Webre is our special guest. www.criminalisewar.org, and we'll be back on the other side of this news break with some words from our sponsors as the X-Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Exonation, Alfred Webre is our special guest of this hour, and we're talking about the tribunal to hear second war crime charge against former President Bush and associates. The website is www.criminalisewar.org. Alfred, what does this mean? Are you going, once the tribunal has done what it's doing, you're going to take all these transcripts, you're going to pass them to other people. What do you hope to accomplish? What's the final goal?
Well, I think that the final goal is, number one, accountability. If we go back to the modern era of defining, prosecuting war crimes, so as to prevent war and to have peaceful dispute resolution. The whole purpose of the Nuremberg tribunals was to criminalize war, and that was the notion of the crime against peace. And that was the great crime that the Third Reich committed. They committed the crime of aggressive war for no purpose. And so the purpose of the Nuremberg tribunals was to outlaw war. So now if we fast forward to the Bush administration, we heard testimony as a tribunal from official documents in the November 2011 session, which demonstrated that the Iraq War was started under completely false pretenses and for no purpose. It was an unjust war, and it was started through deceit and deception by the Bush administration. And therefore, it met the criteria of crimes against peace. I mean, what was established in the Second World of the Nuremberg tribunals, which was at the end of the Second World War, where between 25 million and 100 million people died, is that, look, we're not going to have these wars anymore. We're going to move toward peaceful resolution of disputes. And here we have a war which went against official resolutions of the United Nations, went against world public opinion. There were massive demonstrations around the world, And not only that, what came out at trial was there was massive deception, and this is based on official documents by the Bush administration. So the purpose of that is to record this for history so that no more crimes against peace, no more unjust wars occur.
Do you expect President Bush to get criminally charged for this?
Well, he was. You mean yes, I do, because we observed complete due process. There were 6 defense attorneys appointed for Bush and for Blair at the Kuala Lumpur hearings.
Now, who were these defense lawyers appointed by? Were they actual U.S. government lawyers, the British government lawyers, or were these just citizens like yourself who partake in these tribunals?
Well, both Bush and Blair were served. In fact, Tony Blair flew into Kuala Lumpur to give a speech, and the War Crimes Commission went and served him personally with the complaint. So he was personally served. Bush's office were personally served. They had due notice. They failed to appear.
But under what jurisdiction was the service done? Like here in Canada, if a court, a legitimate court, does a service, that's one thing. But John Q. Public, who just wants to have a tribunal of a bunch of people because they're not satisfied with something, and they issue something that's basically just a piece of paper.
No, because the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, again, was duly constituted under a nonprofit organization, the Perdana Peace Organization of Malaysia, by a high-ranking public official, Tun Dr. Mahathir bin Mohammed. It was widely known throughout the world. I mean, it was carried by BBC in prominent articles back in 2007. Tony Blair came into Malaysia to speak there and was duly served.
He was duly served but he was duly served by an organization that the legal community really doesn't accept.
No. In the field of international humanitarian law, as I mentioned, where you have a situation where the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has systematically ignored over 400 complaints of war crimes by UK and U.S. forces in Iraq, then in the same mode that you can do a citizen's arrest under natural law, then duly constituted citizens' tribunals can initiate proceedings with transcripts, with all of the rules and regulations followed, and then apply to national courts that are part of the Rome Statute and to the ICC to have these enforced. Has what occurred here.
What does the United Nations think of your...
Wait.
Hold on here. What does the United Nations think of your organization?
Well, the International Criminal Court, the Rome Statute, is a United Nations treaty. So we're acting under the purview of a United Nations treaty.
But are you sanctioned by the United Nations?
Well, we are acting under the power of the United Nations treaty.
That's not what I asked. No, that's not what I asked you. Are you sanctioned? Are you recognized by the United Nations or any government outside of Malaysia?
There is no necessity to be sanctioned. I mean, in that case, there would be a, say if the Pradana Peace Organization were a UN recognized NGO, but that is not relevant here because we're operating under the aegis of the Rome Statute. The United Nations doesn't have any jurisdiction here. What has jurisdiction ultimately are the international criminal courts and the International Criminal Court and the national courts that have signed the Rome Statute. Now, we go out and we do our proceedings, we take our verdict and our transcript, and then we go and apply to the national courts, and we say, it's like if we went to a police office and say, here's a complaint, here's all the evidence, now go out and arrest this man and try him.
But nobody's arrested President Bush. Nobody's arrested Tony Blair. Nobody's arrested Dick Cheney. Nobody's arrested Donald Rumsfeld.
But Rob, as I stated and this is known in national news, Dick Cheney does not travel, and the official reason given in the news was, quote, fear of arrest, and he had to cancel a trip to Germany. Likewise, George W. Bush, his most recent trip to Switzerland, he canceled it for fear of arrest. And likewise, George W. Bush to Switzerland for fear of arrest. And likewise, Dick Cheney canceled his most recent speaking tour to Toronto for, I think, fear of arrest, because here in Canada, there are some very, very active citizens organizations that have been, like Lawyers Against the War, of which I'm a member, that have been seeking the arrest of Bush administration officials who attempt to come into Canada.
Okay, all right. So if your organization does have the authority that I believe you're trying to get across to us that it does have because of the way you work, why can't Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld be arrested within the United States?
Because they are protected by the Obama administration, which is, Obama was elected on a platform that he would prosecute war crimes. He would close down Guantanamo, and he would prosecute war crimes. Obama has reneged on his campaign promises, and Obama, who himself is, President Obama is a member of a third-generation CIA family. Both of his grandparents on the mother's side, the Stanley Armour Dunham was a lifelong CIA agent. His mother, Stanley Ann Dunham, was a lifelong CIA agent. And President Obama, as I've written, was inducted into the CIA in 1980 at Occidental College. So he is not going to prosecute George W. Bush. So the Bush administration people are safe at home in the United States so far. But there are parties within the United States, various legal groups that are pressing for prosecution of Bush and associates for war crimes.
All right, let me give you a hypothetical situation here, Alfred. President Bush comes to Canada.
Yeah.
Who's going to arrest him? Under what authority?
No, right. Here, that hypothetical played itself out here in Vancouver shortly before the November 2011 hearings. And that is in late October, early November, Bush and Clinton, former President Bush and former President Clinton, were both invited by a mayor in the lower mainland here to give speeches at $150,000 each at an economic development event. And at that event, citizens first of all, Lawyers Against the War, led by Attorney Gail Davidson, did go to court and did apply to the Attorney General of Canada to exclude Bush from Canada as a convicted war criminal, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, there were demonstrations and attempts of a citizen arrest of Bush. And in a prior visit of George W. Bush to speak in Calgary, there was an attempted citizen arrest of George W. Bush there. Now, the situation now has changed even more that Richard Cheney will no longer travel to Canada, and George W. Bush has not attempted to travel to Canada since November 2011. I believe, this is just my personal opinion, that his lawyers will advise him not to travel to Canada, even though, because the Harper administration is a political ally of the Obama of these policies, the Attorney General of Canada has not given approval for the arrest of Bush.
Do you really think that the government of Canada would be stupid enough to actually authorize the arrest of a former president of the United States? Come on.
In the world of international war crimes, it's a different world than international media.
All right, you and I have to take our final break. Please
yeah.
stand by.
Okay.
I don't know, Exo Nation. I find this a little bit out in left field. I can't see the Canadian government or any other political government that is a power allowing a president of the United States to be arrested on their territory. And what does this tribunal have on the effects of trade between nations? We'll ask Alfred when we come back. Don't go away.
19 Sergeant Central. 19 Sergeant check. Officers on the scene.
Hi, I'm Larry Lawson, host of Paranormal Stakeout. With over 36 years in law enforcement, I have learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, UFOs, and extraterrestrials, how we gather the evidence, preserve that evidence, and present it to a jury of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Join me, Larry Lawson, every week on Paranormal Stakeout when, along with my guests, we'll take a journey to prove with indisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Go to xzbn.net for the broadcast schedule and check me out at paranormalstakeout.com.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today. www.soulbalancing.world.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Alfred Webre is our special guest. You know, I got a message here from one of our listeners who's listening to us right now, and they said, it sounds like you guys are like a group of citizens vigilantes.
Well, but the thing is that we're applying international humanitarian law, and let me make some important points, because people, I think, are not realizing the subtleties going on. On April 6, 2012, Hillary Clinton, who is now Secretary of State, the U.S. State Department released a secret 2006 memo on torture that was written by Condoleezza Rice aide on torture named Philip Zelikow. The Philip Zelikow memo had been ordered destroyed back in 2006 by the Bush White House. But apparently the State Department kept a copy, and it released it suddenly on April 6, 2012. So I asked the question, did the U.S. State Department release, and what that memo says, Philip Zelikow, who was U.S. State Department, U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, as Bush's Secretary of State, Philip Zelikow said, hey guys, waterboarding is illegal. You can't do it. And the White House ordered it destroyed. Now, I think it's a fair question, that the State Department, and this made news on April 6th, this is worldwide news. I think that the U.S. State Department released this on April 6th, just 20 days ago. One of its effects is going to facilitate the findings and the proceedings on the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal of May 7th to 13th on torture, because all of a sudden the Zelikow memo that was thought lost has suddenly been found, and it was released by Hillary Clinton on April 6th. Is that a coincidence? I'm sorry. I'm saying that these are facts.
All right, so
and I'm
let
saying
me, all right,
that in the international world of tribunals, it's different than the international world of news, and that this is what's really going on.
I think that this would have a lot more clout and a lot more clarity if it was coming from a recognized organization instead of a bunch of citizens trying to stir the pot.
But how can you say that, let's go to the nature of, let's go to the identity of the judges, okay?
Albert,
Albert, wait,
Albert,
I'm not going to
hold on. I'm not going to hold on. No. I'm sorry. Get off your bandstand. Running out of time. I just can't keep on going because somebody's got a little box he wants to stand on and yell at the top of his voice. It doesn't work like that. It's not the Alfred Webre show. It's the Rob McConnell X-Zone show. And you know what? There are a bunch of citizens who are trying to do something. They have no authority. They want to get President Bush arrested. They want to get Tony Blair arrested. They're claiming responsibility for the former president of the United States not being able to travel outside of the U.S. These guys have got a major ego problem. Welcome back to Earth, gang. We're going to follow up on this, and I'm going to send a transcript of this to the White House. We're going to see what they have to say. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break here in the X-Zone as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name's Rob McConnell. Send me your emails. Tell me what you think. X-Zone at xzoneradiotv.com.